Online and available in the back are study guides that are based on these messages. We're using that at least in one class on Wednesday night. And then you might want to use them for a small group. You don't have to, but if that might be an easy way of getting your small group, especially as we start to form new small groups. It's just questions based on the message, and they're set up under the serendipity style. And so you can look at those online and print them out, or you can grab one as you leave. Listen, everybody has gotten that phone call that has changed our lives. We all have gotten a phone call that we will never forget. In fact, that phone call was so impactful that we remember where we were at, we remember what we were doing, and in many cases, how that phone call changed our lives. Now, sometimes it's good news, right? Those are wonderful calls. You got the job, right, that you had been hoping for. Or your spouse calls and said, it's positive. Come home quick. Really, really good news. Or it's when you really did win the Publisher Clearinghouse sweepstakes. You actually won. You got that phone call. You still remember it. And then not only are there those good calls, there can be those bad calls. Not good news. You get the call from the doctor's office. The test came back. Or a call that somehow involves a loved one, maybe a parent that's aging, or children. A call from the police, or there's a call about a betrayal that you were not aware of. Here's what I want you to take away this morning. One day, you're going to get that kind of a call. One day there will be news that you never expected. And when that call comes, it will catch you in one of two conditions. It will find you maybe living mostly isolated, mostly disconnected from other people. And so when that phone call that hits you, basically you're going to face it alone. Or that phone call will find you living in community. You'll be surrounded by some people who know you and who love you because you have been eating together, you've been laughing together, you've been crying together, you've been playing and praying together. You've done life together. And so as a result, they'll be able to sort of hold you up, to strengthen you, to support you, to sort of help keep you together, as if it was done by some invisible force or a hedge, because it is a force. There's an Old Testament book called Ecclesiastes. And it says basically that. Look at this. It contrasts people living in relationships, which is what we've been talking about, with the fragile and the vulnerable people who live in isolation. Look at this, Ephesians 4, 9 through 12. Two are better than one because they have a good return for their work. If either of them falls down, if either of them gets the call, one can help the other. But sorrowful, pity the one who falls and has no one to help them up. Though one could be overpowered by things, by people, by events, by circumstances, two can defend better. In fact, a cord of three, the strand is not easily, quickly broken. The ideal is a cord, when you have three and you wrap those three together. That's good news. And by the way, research has proven that biblical truth. There's a Harvard researcher named Robert Putnam, and he writes that people who are relationally isolated, listen to this. This is from Harvard, not from Christianity Today. They're more likely to experience colds, heart attacks, strokes, cancer, depression, and premature death of all sorts. And he cites over a dozen studies that show the importance of being in community, relationship. He says this, look at it. It says, people who are socially disconnected are between 2 and 5 times more likely to die from all causes compared with matched individuals who have close ties. See, we said this a couple of weeks ago. God sees the importance, God sees the need for us to be connected. You remember, we talked about Adam. Remember, this is before the fall. Adam, who lived in a perfect world, perfect environment. He was in the perfect garden. He had a relationship with God. And yet God says in the middle of all of that, it's not good for humans to be alone. And by the way, that is still God's plan. His plan is for everybody to be known and to be loved, to be cared for, to be cherished. And that plan, are you ready for this? That plan today is called the church. The ones who are called out together. I got to tell you this. I've been doing this now for 40 years. I can't believe 1978. There's never been anything like the church. Never anything like the church. Now, I know when I say that because I've been doing it for 40 years. I know churches can sometimes be a pain. Sometimes people in a church can be petty. They can be controlling. They can fight over the strangest and the most insignificant things. Churches will never, ever be perfect. You know why? Because you're in it. Right? We are all of us here are saved sinners. We're broken people. We have fallen natures. And I know this, that wherever there are broken, fallen people, even in a church, there will be annual meetings. right? But it's like a marriage, right? It's like a marriage. Marriage is not always bliss, right? Sometimes it's hard work. But in the middle of it, even in the tough times, there is that undergirding that says that there's a commitment to one another, thick or thin, sickness or in health, poverty or wealth. That is, that in all the uncertainties of this crazy, fickle world, there's one place, there's an oasis that you can count on. That we are in this together. And what we do in marriage, as God ordained it, He does in a church. Laura and I have been married now for over 25 years, and sooner or later, Laura will be disappointed in me. In Acts chapter 2, you remember that it's the birth of the church. It describes, in a sense, people getting married to each other, as it were. They were committing themselves to each other in this birth of the church. And one of the things it continually repeats in that birth process is this expression, that they were devoted to each other. In fact, Acts 2:42 says this, they devoted themselves to teaching, to instruction, and then it says they devoted themselves to fellowship. They devoted themselves to fellowship. Now, when we hear the word fellowship, this is not coffee and donuts in that room. It means they had things, all things in common. They bled with one another. It's a strong word. They devoted themselves to community. They got real. They took off their masks. They prayed together. They ate together. They suffered together. And they did this, and the text says, on a daily basis. Every day they would meet. Every day they would meet to worship. Every day they would meet in homes to break bread. See, I want to say it this way. God hates isolation. God loves family. Right? When Jesus taught us to pray, remember? He didn't pray, my Father in heaven. He prayed, our Father in heaven. Community. You've got a ton of brothers and sisters. And by the way, this thing actually works. I told you about Robert Putnam, the Harvard researcher. He's written a book called Bowling Alone, right? You know one bowls alone. That's the whole purpose of the theme of the book, is the importance of community. And he goes through different groups, different areas of where people, look at this. I want you to see this graph. Now, in this graph, right here, this is like a level of happiness. And this is, from not being happy to happiness. And this, at the bottom, is people who attend church. And so if you look at this, if people attend, look at that, 20 times a year, they are average happy. It says this, if people who attend church every week, 50 or 60 times a week, they're the happiest people. There's something about coming to church, being with God's people, worshiping, praying, learning, something about that leads to a greater joy. Go figure. See, here's what happens. Sometimes people might come to church, they might come for a very long time, but nobody really knows them. That might be you. You might be in sort of a chronic visitor category. I met somebody Wednesday night. I'm not the best at knowing faces and names sometimes. And I was talking with this woman, and I said, how long have you been coming here? I said, first of all, I said, are you new? She goes, no, I've been coming about 4 months. And I said, oh. She goes, yeah, but I get up and I get out very quick. And she came as a result of our teacher appreciation, which was great. You might still be in a relational, isolated worship style. So you really don't experience the power of community. And you won't experience the power of community worship if you only attend. I say that to say this. Get into a group where you can experience mutual knowing, mutual serving, mutual caring. I'm going to tell you how powerful this is from Putnam. Putnam says this: the bottom line from this multitude of studies, if you belong to no group but decide to join one, he says you can cut your risk of dying over the next year in half. That's why we call Wednesday Life Night, right? You come here, you get life. In our church in Seattle that we were at, they called the small groups life groups, right? And our motto was, join a group or die. And so that's our new motto for our small groups. Join a group or die. And there's absolutely no manipulation in that. Look at this, and we'll stop. The writer of Hebrews 10:24 says this: let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good works, good deeds. Remember, that's always an emphasis. It's not how much we know, it's how much we care. And not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing. Are you in that habit? Here's a list of people from our attendance charts that I think are possibly in a habit, but encouraging one another. See, the time to build community, listen, I'm going to tell you this. The time to build community and friendship and connection and spiritual bond is now. It's now. Because if you wait for the phone call, then it's going to be too late. When the storm comes, when everything falls apart, people who have lived isolated, it feels almost too awkward to ask for help. And sometimes you don't even have the energy at that point to do the work that's required. And so they actually become more isolated, more alone. So the time to build community, and that's not just attending church, is before the phone call comes. And again, Hebrews, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing. Now, you might be sitting here this morning, and maybe you're not in a crisis right now. Maybe you're feeling pretty good, pretty self-sufficient. Maybe you feel like you've sort of got life wired. But I want to make you two promises. You can take this to the bank. Number one, the phone call will come for you. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not this week, but one day there will be a call and you will realize how much you need people. Here's the second. Even if you think you don't need anybody, I guarantee you, somebody needs you. Somebody needs your prayers. Somebody needs your encouragement. Somebody needs your perspective. Somebody needs your touch, your shoulder, your challenge, your hope. See, it's a strange truth. When you offer community, when you offer support, when you offer caring, you also receive it. You know, we live in the Northeast. We live in New Jersey. There's so much affluence here. There's so much financial affluence, so much vocational opportunities, and so much relational and spiritual poverty. People are just too busy, right? Nobody moves to New Jersey for relationships, right? You know that. They move here for money. They move here for jobs. They move here for opportunities. And there are lonely people, hurting people, scared people. And Jesus says, through us, come to my family. Come to this family. That's our mission. Our mission basically is just to wake people up to Jesus and to wake each other up, stir each other up to what our message is. And small groups are essential to that message. Remember, we focus outward because you're the voice, you're the salt, you're the light. You'll reach people that I can't, that our youth pastor can't, our associate pastor, our children's pastor can't do it. You're the light in that area. You're the salt. You're the voice. And then next, we stir one another up and we encourage one another in life groups. I want to introduce to you by way of video, Sean and Shanna Hingle. Let's look at this video.
Hi, I'm Sean Hingle, and this is my wife, Shanna Hingle.
And we've been living in New York City for the past 10 years, and we've just returned back. So our small group experience here is small because we just got back, but we have been majorly involved in small groups in New York City for the past 6 years.
So, the first time you walk into a small group, there's so many people there, and you're nervous, and it can be daunting at some points, but it's a really special way to get to know the community and to insert yourself into other people's lives, because you start to talk about what's going on in your life, what's ailing you, what troubles that you have, what struggles are in your relationship or your career and whatnot. Whatever it is, you begin to put it out in the open because you're building a church family slowly together in this small group. And I would say as time went on through the church that we were with and the multiple small groups that we were in, sometimes we hosted, sometimes we led, sometimes we did neither, and we traveled to go to, other people's homes for these small groups. Regardless of what it was always an intimate way to build community, strengthen relationships within the church, and get to know new people. Because there's always new people, because you're just constantly just like calling and inviting them in to, talk about church, talk about life, worship the Lord, investigate, the word and what it means in our lives presently as we are.
And I always say there comes a time in your life where you need community to surround you. And we had that throughout my twin pregnancy, which all of you were praying for. And the Lord worked miracles, but it was really a scary, scary pregnancy. And I ended up living in the hospital for 6 weeks prior and had the girls 2 months early. And so we lived in the NICU for 2 months. So I didn't have any time to nest like most moms do. And so our small group stepped in the gap in that moment. And I did not have to lift a finger. They went over to our apartment and they built the cribs, they did our laundry, they cleaned, they rearranged, they set up meal trains for us, they paid for the ferry for us to go back and forth to the NICU every day. I mean, it was like they took care of every single thing that we needed to have done that we wanted to do ourselves, but we literally could not because we needed to just focus on the babies in the NICU. And that was like the most unbelievable experience to watch, just people be the hands and feet of Jesus and step in the gap for us in that moment.
I think the greatest part of that entire journey was the emotional support that you get and the encouragement that you get. You know, every day it was a text or a call from somebody, just, I'm thinking about you, I'm praying for you, how are you? And that, that little thing, that little note that you get from your brothers and sisters throughout the day when things can seem like they're just super overwhelming. That can be the 100%, 360 turnaround. I'm seeing my day in a new way now because I got that encouragement, I got that support, and that's what we found it's about. It's about supporting people through their biggest and deepest struggles and being there for them and sharing life. We're sharing life together, and that's what we feel we've encountered in small groups.
Yeah, shouldn't have to do it alone.
How do you fight your battles? Do you fight them alone? Or are you ready for some people to fight by your side, at your side? They got your back. Maybe you've been doing that. You've been doing that in a small group for years, perhaps. Or maybe you've been really intimidated and scared and said, I don't know. It means that I have to get to know someone else. Actually, more, it means that they have to get to know me or us or my family. No, that's scary. That's a lot to ask. And it is a lot to ask. It's a whole lot to ask to be known. We could ask you to know someone else and invest in someone else's life. We do things like that at CSI, right? Pour yourself out, sacrifice, give generously. We can do that, right? A lot of us can muster up enough to give. But to be given to is pretty tough. It's humbling. It's vulnerable. You have to make needs known. But go for it. Go for it. That might be the riskiest thing you do, is to say, I really need a friend. I'd like someone to know me and to love me. The mess that I am, the mess that my family is, yeah, right? It's like welcome to life. You have no idea what other people are struggling with or going through or have been through, and small groups are the place to find out and to discover that together and to say, hey, I'm in it with you. I'm not going anywhere. In the same way that Jesus has been faithful to me and never abandoned me, you know what? I'm gonna follow his example, and I'm gonna make myself available to you, and I'm gonna welcome your availability to me. That's what we go for in small groups. So go after that, Valley View. If this is your first Sunday with us, if this is your 1000th Sunday with us, go after that. If you're not in a group, we have some that are forming up. We have some groups that have some spaces that you can join into. And so we're ready to have this discussion with you. Your answer or your response is just yes.